So before we can do a job analysis, we actually have to design the jobs in a way that meets the demands of the requirements and the tasks that need to be done, but also to design work in such a way that it enhances and encourages our workers to be motivated and engaged. And these are the things we talked about in the second competency module, where we were talking about employee relations and engagement and motivation and all those sorts of things. And job design, if you remember our discussion about the expanded expectancy model for understanding motivation, you understand that job design is a really key element of intrinsic motivation. We design jobs in such a way that it enhances people's work. It helps them to feel engaged and that they're doing something important and that it's meaningful and that they have the autonomy to complete it and do it on their own. It gets at autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And when we design jobs that are high in those elements, then that means we are engaging in really good job design. That in the end, when we are ready to do our job descriptions, it needs to reflect the way that we've designed those jobs. So job design is the way that the workers experience the work. So how do they like it? Do they feel like they have autonomy? Do they feel like they have control over their environment? Those sorts of things. And there are different ways that we can get at some of these job design issues. For example, you can enlarge jobs. So people get bored when they do really simplistic jobs, which used to be the thing in the turn of the 20th century, in the early 1900s. They had these very simplistic jobs. You bend over here, you do this, you get it done, you rinse and repeat over and over again. And they thought that was a great way for people to work. But what they didn't realize is people got bored very quickly. And that was not a good thing for them because their performance would go down. The more that they got bored, the more they found things to distract themselves, and they never really did a good job. There was not high productivity. So they decided, well, let's try enlarging the job. So let's give them more things to do. Often that's more work, same pay, right? Sometimes companies will say, well, we'll give you more things to do, but they don't enrich their paycheck. And that's problematic as well. Job rotation, which is the item at the bottom, is another way that they could mix up and get rid of the boredom that can happen when you have overly simplistic, repetitive jobs. So job rotation means I do this work for now, and then a week later I might do a different task, and a week later I do a different task. And when we mix it up and give people an opportunity to rotate what they do, that also helps to manage boredom. Still not enough, though. Really what we want is job enrichment, where people have autonomy and mastery and purpose behind what they do. And when we have that, we know from the research that this improves productivity, it improves motivation, and improves quality outputs and all sorts of things. So enriched jobs are jobs that give people a lot of responsibility when they understand the scope of what they're supposed to do, and they get good feedback, and they understand how to be better. And the job is rewarding intrinsically to them. And that's what we want to see. If we don't have jobs that are intrinsically rewarding, it can be very problematic. I have a friend of mine who about 40-ish years ago, he was working at an assembly line for a company. And in that assembly line, it was kind of boring. It was repetitive, and he'd paint the back of a fan, and a computer fan, and he would paint it and paint it and paint it, and it's the same thing over and over again all day long. And he would go out on his lunch breaks, and people would be out there getting drunk, getting high, because they were so bored doing the exact same thing. They were not enriched, they were not challenged, they were just bored. That resulted in disengagement and ultimately low productivity. So my friend quit that job because it was boring, and he knew that was going to be a dangerous place for him to be, because if one worker is working unsafely, then that's going to impact everybody else. So it's really easy to see how overly simplistic jobs can actually backfire on organizations and make people feel disengaged way more than they should be. So breaking down the the elements of the job enrichment is really about what we call the job characteristics model. The job characteristics model is about designing jobs that are very enriched with skill variety, task identity, task significance, that they get autonomy, they get feedback, and then from there they experience meaningful work, they have more responsibility, and they have good knowledge about what their job entails and why they need to do it and how they can improve. And this triggers intrinsic motivation. And we know if we put too much emphasis on the extrinsic, remember I said, people will not engage in the intrinsic. The intrinsic motivation will disappear. So we have to cultivate intrinsic motivation because it's intrinsic motivation that ultimately drives engagement. Because when people are excited about their jobs, they are much more likely to engage and want to learn more and want to be better and want to improve and want to move on in life. So the job characteristics model, the goal here is to make sure we get higher performance and higher motivation when we make sure there is more variety, more identity, more significance, ultimately autonomy and good feedback. All of those things matter. And then the people will feel experienced meaningfulness, responsibility, and knowledge about their job. The job demands control model says that when workers are experiencing high stress and low control, we create more problems. So when there's high demands and there's low control over my environment, and I feel like I am at the mercy of people around me, that creates an enormous amount of stress for workers, and that's not good for productivity and engagement. The job demands resource model basically argues when we make sure our workers have control over their workplace environment, they have autonomy, an intrinsic motivator, they can participate in designing and developing their ideas and engaging in their work at a deeper level. And when they feel like they have support from people, that enhances intrinsic motivation. And that job design is much more valuable to the organization because it directly relates to good productivity and motivation as outcomes. All the research that's been done on job design, we know when we have enriched jobs, when we are really working hard to enhance intrinsic motivation, we will find that there's greater job performance, lower burnout, more satisfaction. And it all comes from enriched jobs, making sure people have responsibility, authority, knowledge, the ability to learn, everything that enhances intrinsic motivation. A new trend is this thing called job crafting. And basically, job crafting, it gives the workers the responsibility for designing and redesigning their jobs as need be based on the needs of the organization, but also their own needs and their own personalities and their own interests. And so when we allow people to craft their own jobs, it does increase motivation and excitement, more meaningful work. And the goal is people who are proactive are always thinking about how can I enhance my job and make my job better so that I can improve my performance and also streamline what I'm doing to be more efficient and effective. And so job crafting is a novel way that we can give the power back to the employees. Think about the job design issues, right? Making sure that workers actually get some control over their environment and being able to adapt their work as they need to. And this is where we are less hands-on micromanaging process and we allow people to manage their process on their own. We don't prescribe how things should be done. Now, not all positions can work this way, but a lot of knowledge-based jobs, a lot of 21st century jobs that are a little bit more amorphous and less programmed tasks focused. This is a thing that we can do. If we say, look, I need you to get X done, do it however you need to do it, and you'll find people will rise to the occasion and they'll be more excited about their job and they will be more enhanced in what they do. So giving people more authority, autonomy, responsibility will enhance their performance and enhance intrinsic motivation. As we learned during the pandemic, flexible work schedules can actually be very beneficial for workers. And there are a lot of organizations that were doing this long before the pandemic happened, but we did not necessarily see a decrease in performance from people. What we missed was company culture. What we missed was daily interactions and the synergies that happen when people are in the workplace together. But the flex time and remote work and things like that can be very beneficial. Problem is that they lose the social support when they work remotely for too long. So it's a pro and the con, right? There are companies I know that do a hybrid approach where they can work, they have to be in the office a certain number of days and then they can be home a certain number of days. And they get to pick and choose the days that they are in and out as long as they show up to work. And again, this provides control and autonomy to the individuals. It enhances intrinsic motivation and it increases performance for people. The last design element that we want to talk about is contingent workers, because contingent workers are basically people who are only here for a limited time. They have a fixed term, a week, a day, a month, a quarter, um, and they're like temp workers or independent consultants, right? They come in, they do a job, they do their thing, and they leave. The gig economy is like Uber and DoorDash and things like that. People can choose when they want to work and choose if they don't want to work. And they can choose where they want to work and how long they want to work. They make their own hours. And so that gig economy is I come in, I work hard, I make some money, and then I can relax for a while and not do things. So they're temporary they're temporary work. You're not necessarily a full-time worker, but you get to work when you want to work and if you want to work. And again, there's a pro and the con to this gig economy in that gig workers tend to get paid less than they would and they have no benefits relative to full-time employees, but there's tremendous flexibility in your ability to work when you need to and not when you don't want to.